For some, it's the ultimate adrenaline rush. Man and machine up against the most challenging and brutal conditions in Australian motor racing. Featuring the bravest race-hardened men and women of the sport, they battle the most rugged, dusty and dangerous terrain in the country. And they do it in these incredible machines. Purpose-built pro buggies and stadium truck-style monsters, highly modified production-based four-wheel drives and light and nimble all-terrain vehicles. Their motto is simple: go hard or go home. And after a 10-month off-season, the wait is finally over. 80 teams from across the nation have converged at Mildura's Kira station. What faces them is a pure test of strength and endurance. 2 days and 600 kilometres of grueling terrain in what is the longest and toughest event of the calendar, the BF Goodrich Tyres Sunraysia 600. This is the 2016 CAMS Australian Off-Road Championship. For 35 years, the Australian Off-Road Championship has been the pinnacle of off-road racing in this sunburnt country of ours. This year, competitors will battle the elements and each other over 3 epic rounds. Mildura in Victoria, Waikerie in South Australia, and the jewel in the crown, the Tats Fink Desert Race in the Red Centre. At each round, drivers and navigators will face unique conditions and challenges, calling upon a mixture of skill and intuition to survive. Competition is split into 8 separate categories: Pro Class, Extreme Two-Wheel Drive, Performance Two-Wheel Drive, Extreme Four-Wheel Drive, Production Four-Wheel Drive, Super Lights, Super 1650 Buggy, and Pro Light Buggy. Series organiser and 2012 King of the Desert Brad Gallard has high hopes for the season ahead and is ready to go green.
I think it's just going to be a revived championship where everyone's really keen. You know, there's great numbers. You know, we haven't seen these numbers before. You know, with both the entry list for Mildura and Fink. It's going to be a long weekend. There's no doubt about that, and I'm sure it's going to be pretty brutal out there. So, but you know, I'll try and fit it all in.
The BF Goodrich Tyres Sunraysia 600 is the first leg of the 2016 season. A 600-kilometre long gauntlet of dust, dirt, and searing heat. Beginning with a prologue where drivers compete for top qualifying times, the fastest 10 will then progress to a shootout, which determines the official starting order. Teams will then battle for bragging rights over 2 unique races: a 200-kilometre long Section 1 and a 400-kilometre long Section 2. 2015 champion Shannon Wrench has 8 national titles to his name. Driving in Pro Class this weekend with his father Ian navigating, he's looking to sow the seeds for title number 9.
Made a few small improvements hopefully on the car, so hopefully, you know, that works out for the weekend. We'll just have to wait and see what happens, but no major changes. So yeah, hopefully we can continue our form from last year. So this is a Pro Class buggy. We use a Jimco chassis. We've got a twin turbo V6 3.5 litre Nissan engine. We're getting a top speed of around 220 kilometres an hour, which is pretty quick when you've got trees and fences beside you, so it keeps you on your toes. And we could, off any jump, you could get up to 20 foot in the air. So it's definitely exciting, and hope the fans enjoy it.
Continuing the family theme is Aaron Habe and his navigator wife Liz in their V8 Chev-powered Element buggy. After finishing 7th overall last season, the husband and wife team are in the hunt for a successful opening encounter.
2015 for us was a pretty good year. We had a few few issues with the car here last year, so we ended up prologuing very well, but the timing chain let us down at the end of the race. So overall, this is a great track to come to. We love coming here, but last year was a bit of a disaster. We actually had an engine fire as well, so it wasn't much fun. This buggy's a Element off-road prodigy, so we build this ourselves with our Element team, and we build this at Walker's, down near Walker's Flat. The buggy's probably a bit quicker out of the corners and straight line speed, but the trucks sort of love the rough a bit better.
In extreme two-wheel drive, Greg Gartner will be leading the charge alongside arch rival Brad Gallard. Gartner's highly modified Ford F-150 truck took him to second in class last year, and this season sees the return of the angry V8 Warrior.
This truck here has got more suspension travel than the stadium truck. It's got more horsepower. It's quite durable what it's got to do. For jumping and long course stuff, this has just got that little bit more suspension travel, a little bit more horsepower. And we run an Albin 6-speed sequential, which is they're good sponsors of ours, and we're in developing this gearbox for those guys. So very similar, but a little different underneath the bonnet.
Returning to extreme four-wheel drive in 2016 is Queenslander Clayton Chapman. His weapon of choice, a battle-ready Mitsubishi Triton that's packing a roaring turbocharged V8 underneath.
In the off-season, we've just a few performance upgrades, a bit more boost and a couple of things like that. But just a lot of not a lot of changes, but more just the prepping. So just going over everything again, because once the cars get a bit of age on, things wear. You just gotta keep chasing those things to make it reliable. We race an extreme four-wheel drive, so what it is basically a silhouette of a four-wheel drive vehicle, and essentially you can do whatever you want underneath. It's limited by capacity, so 6 litre V8 or 3.5 litre turbo V6 or 6-cylinder or anything else. Underneath it's nothing of a Triton, but it just has a silhouette to make it look like that, so that's all we require for our class.
The BF Goodrich Tyres Sunraysia 600 began early on day one with the running of the prologue. Each team would be given a chance to lay down their best time on an abridged 10-kilometre version of the overall 50-kilometre course. Recording a strong time in the prologue is absolutely essential for a team's progression throughout the event. Based on their times, the 10 fastest teams then progress to a top 10 shootout heading into Section 1 of the Sunraysia 600. Leading the field away was the Mitsubishi Pajero of Jeff Pickering, who is contesting for the production four-wheel drive category. Closely following was Amy Chapman in her Nissan Patrol, aiming for her first class win in the National Championship. Pickering would go on to lay down the quickest time for production four-wheel drive, but it wouldn't be enough to make the shootout. New additions to the 2016 season are the Superlight and Invitational classes for all-terrain vehicles. Brett Perrott in his Polaris led the Superlights field away. Perrott couldn't catch Russell Hartnett though, whose time was over 45 seconds quicker and enough for pole position in the Superlights. In the Invitational class, multiple Australian rally champion Cody Crocker was the first to take off and gave the factory Polaris team a strong start to its AORC campaign with pole position in the class. In performance two-wheel drive, Paul Heumann led the field in his Toyota Hilux, followed shortly by 15-year-old Stuart Chapman in the Mitsubishi Triton. The teenager was making his national debut after receiving special dispensation from CAMS. However, it was Darren Vanderwood who topped the charts to record the fastest time in performance two-wheel drive. Extreme four-wheel drive would get underway with Clayton Chapman leading the 10-kilometre chase around Kira Station. He would go on to take category honours in the prologue, but would just narrowly miss out in the shootout, qualifying 11th overall. Tony Fellhaber led the Pro Light class away, with James Lockett closely behind. But it was Dale Martin who would set the pace in the Pro Light category, clocking the fastest time by just 3 seconds, whilst Tony Fellhaber would fail to complete the prologue and had to be towed back. Extreme two-wheel drive class would be a hard-fought affair, with Brad Gallard leading the pack on their qualifying run. Greg Gartner launched next and began his pursuit of the top time. Bo Robertson kicked off the out-of-bounds racing attack in the BF Goodrich truck, with Stephen Sanderson, Ivan Robertson and Carl Havey tailing off the extreme two-wheel drive field. Havey was in a newly built Geyser Brothers chassis and was looking for a strong showing in its debut run. But blitzing the field was Greg Gartner, who took the quickest time and made the top 10 in 8th place. Brad Gallard would also just scrape into the shootout, landing in 10th place. In the Pro class, Travis Robinson launched first and would be in the hunt for a blistering time in the Premier Off-Road category. Also contesting the Pro field would be Jack Rhodes in the Fuchs Lubricants entry. 8-time and defending champion Shannon Wrench in the BF Goodrich Hogsbreath machine. The husband and wife team of Aaron and Liz Havey. Greg Hicks in the Jaws racing machine. Michael Marson in the JB Automotive Ford. And the Brenthal Industries entry of Glenn Towers. After pushing the limits of the 10-kilometre course, it was Travis Robinson who would set the benchmark for the pro field, as well as the outright standings. He was 8 seconds clear of his nearest rival, Shannon Wrench, who took second fastest overall. Over 70 teams would contest the prologue, and the top 10 finished with Travis Robinson on top, followed by Shannon Wrench, Jack Rhodes, Tanner James, Mark Burrows, Aaron Havey, Glenn Owen, Greg Gartner, Matthew Kittle, and Brad Gallard, all of whom would progress to the top shootout on day one. With qualifying run and done on day one, the top 10 fastest would face off once again to determine who would lead the field for Section 1 of the BF Goodrich Tyres Sunraysia 600. 8 pro buggies and 2 extreme two-wheel drive trucks would tackle the 10-kilometre course in a Bathurst-style shootout, with each driver being set off in 1-minute intervals. The top time in the shootout would prove to be a valuable asset for the victor, giving them pole position and the coveted advantage of clean racing air later in the day. After securing 10th place in the prologue, Brad Gallard would begin first in the shootout and cut over 3 seconds off his personal best to lay down the benchmark time. Matthew Kittle was next, and despite cutting almost half a second off his prologue time, could manage to catch Gallard and slipped into second place. Greg Gartner was third to contest the shootout and blitzed the opening 2 attempts, improving almost 2 seconds on his prologue time and knocking Gallard out of the number 1 spot. Gartner's reign at the top was short-lived, however. Starting 4th, Glenn Owen was looking for a strong showing and would prove that he's a force to be reckoned with this year. He knocked over 7 seconds off Gartner's top time and jumped straight to the top, pushing Gallard down to third and Kittle out of the top three. But Aaron Havey wasn't going down without a fight, taking it to Owen and flying under his time by less than 0.2 of a second, giving Havey the coveted number one position and pushing Owen to second, Gartner to third, and now Gallard off the shootout podium. Launching sixth in the shootout was Mark Burrows, but he could only manage to squeeze into third place, over 2 seconds slower than Havey and Owen. Burrows' third place showing would push Greg Gartner now out of the top three. Tanner James was next to contest the top 10 and would ruin Burrows' party on the podium, improving on his time by over 2 seconds to steal third place. The top three times would now only be split by just 0.02 of a second. Starting in 8th place, Jack Rhodes was the only driver not to improve on his prologue time, dropping 2 seconds behind his best. This was only good for 5th position in the shootout, behind Havey, Owen, James and Burrows. Defending champion Shannon Wrench was next and would go on to show the entire field why he's an 8-time Australian title holder. He blitzed the current best time by over 6 seconds, bringing Aaron Havey's reign at the top to an end and becoming the new number one contender for pole position in the Sunraysia 600. But Travis Robinson's 2016 campaign was just getting started. After topping the prologue, Robinson was looking to continue his undefeated streak, and he went on to annihilate all in his path. He knocked Wrench out of first place by almost 8 seconds and took the top time in the shootout overall. Wrench would remain in second, followed by Aaron Havey in third. Glenn Owen would stay in fourth, while Tanner James, Mark Burrows, Jack Rhodes, Greg Gartner, Brad Gallard and Matthew Kittle would round out the top 10. The coveted number one spot would be Travis Robinson's, and he would start the Sunraysia 600 in pole position.
We knew it was a top 10 shootout, so we didn't go too hard, and then yeah, we were actually a little bit loose then because I thought we were going a little bit too hard because we were getting a fair bit of dust, so I backed off and it started to get a little bit loose, so we got back on the gas and yeah, pulled itself straight. So
with the stage now set, we invite you to join us after the break when Section 1 of the Sunraysia 600 gets underway for this, the opening round of the 2016 Australian Off-Road Championship. With the prologue and top 10 shootout complete on day one of the BF Goodrich Tyres Sunraysia 600, the stage is set for Section 1 of the 600-kilometre race to go green. Battling such harsh, unforgiving conditions not only pushes the mind and body to the limit, but the vehicles as well. Preparation is key, and the teams know they'll have to muster all they can to survive this epic 600-kilometre enduro.
This is a tough race. 200 k's today, very important to get a good position by tonight, and then 400 kilometres tomorrow. It is a tough race. It's a long race, which we quite enjoy, and you really got to be there at the end and be a bit smart. And it's hard for drivers to be smart, but you sort of just got to say, well, you know, we've got to be there at the end tomorrow. Dust is a big issue. There is stumps here, gates, trees. It's going to be a real contest of concentration and just keep this truck in really good straight condition by tonight, ready for tomorrow.
It is a long race. 600 k's in a weekend is tough, and it's a tough track on cars. So very sandy, very loamy, hard on the engine and drive terrain. So we'll go out there with the attitude to get through it. Last year we only got 40 k's in each day due to diff failures. We've done a lot of changes since then, and we're really just chasing the finishing event. The car's got good speed, and so we're just looking to finish this one.
It's got a navigator in the car to help direct us throughout the course, not only with the course, but it also helps us out if we unfortunately get a flat tyre. So it's we think it's very important to have a navigator in the car. You have got the option to run a single seater, but I think that'd be pretty tough by yourself out there and get a bit lonely at times. So it's we enjoy having each other's company out there and work well with each other.
You could be doing 150 round a corner, and then there might be a left and a right through trees, and you've got to be on the brake, be really committed, and it is tough going. So anything can happen here. You've got to stay on the track, and very fast speeds, and just tight, twisty going, and with a lot of dust.
We're going over bumps in terrain that cars should not go over. And it's actually mind-boggling. We're still, even after 3 years, getting our heads around the speeds that you can do and what they're capable of. And to have it built by us, and we do a lot of the work ourselves, it's a real achievement for my whole family who's backing us, so it's great.
The 600 kilometre long Sunraysia 600 would be split into 2 parts across 2 days. On day 1, section 1 of the course would be contested over 200 kilometres, while on day 2, the race would continue with section 2 comprising of 400 kilometres. The top 10 shootout had determined that Travis Robinson would be first to jump in section 1, having laid down the quickest qualifying time. He would have a unique advantage over the rest of the 80-car field, as starting first ensures he would have clean air and uninterrupted vision. The prologue run earlier in the day had already taken some scalps, with Ivan Robertson in the Pro class not making it to the start line for section 1. Pole sitter Travis Robinson would lead the field away in both the Pro class and outright for section 1, and would leave a cloud of dust behind for the remaining competitors to follow. Closely following Robinson was Shannon Wrench, who after qualifying second would be first to chase Robinson around the 200 kilometre long circuit. Starting third was Aaron Habe, who would crank up the pace on the leaders. Glenn Owen wasn't far behind Habe, starting 4th out of 73 starters. Continuing with their qualifying order, Tanner James launched next, followed by Mark Burrows. Jack Rhodes began his Sunraysia 600 in 7th position, while the first of the Extreme two-wheel drives began their campaigns next, with Greg Gartner leading the charge and Brad Gallard right behind him. Qualifying 10th, Matthew Kittle was the next fastest to leave the start line. Northern Territorian Greg Hicks in the Jaws racing machine soon followed. Also in the Pro class, Glenn Towers and Michael Marson initiated their 2016 campaigns, but would have their work cut out for them as the dust clouds began to grow. Section 1 of the Sunraysia 600 would be contested over 2 laps of Kira Station, each 100 kilometres in length. As the race approached the halfway point of lap 1, it was Travis Robinson still exerting his dominance out front. "53 seconds back, Aaron Habe had worked his way up the field and would sit comfortably now in 2nd place, overtaking Shannon Wrench, who had fallen slightly behind the pace. Glenn Owen had also overtaken Wrench, moving up into 3rd. Michael Marson was motoring on behind the leaders, creating a significant gap between himself and the remaining Pro-Class competitors. Greg Hicks and Tanner James were behind Marson, leaving them at the tail of the Pro-Class after lap 1. Disaster then struck for Shannon Wrench and his Hog's Breath machine. At the beginning of lap 2, Wrench had no choice but to retire with CV joint issues, a cruel blow for his title defence. Also suffering malfunctions were Glenn Towers, Greg Hicks and Tanner James, all retiring from the race after completing just 1 lap. Up front, the trio of Travis Robinson, Aaron Habe and Glenn Owen soldiered on for hopeful podium finishes. But they would soon strike traffic, and this would throw curveballs at both Robinson and Habe. While battling traffic in the dusty conditions, Robinson would drop time, closing the gap between the top 3. When Habe was forced to pit towards the end of the final lap, it was Glenn Owen who pounced and overtook both drivers to snatch the race lead. Owen would take overall honours at the end of Section 1, making his mark on a Pro Class that was battered and bruised after the first 200-kilometre gauntlet. In Extreme 2-wheel drive, Greg Gardner and Brad Gallard continued their white-hot rivalry from the prologue and top 10 shootout. Towards the middle of lap 1, Gallard was only 2 seconds off Gardner's pace. Meanwhile, Aaron Habe's brother, Carl, would only last 10 kilometres out on the course before they'd retired from the event with mechanical issues. At the beginning of lap 2, Gardner had extended his lead over Brad Gallard, the split now being over 20 seconds. Further back in Extreme 2-wheel drive, Bo Robinson was forced to pit after only 1 lap and won't return, leaving brother Travis to carry the family name in the Pro Class. After 2 laps and 200 kilometres of Kira Station, it was Greg Gardner who proved too good, taking out top honours in Extreme 2-wheel drive over Brad Gallard. In the Pro Light category, Dale Martin was virtually unbeatable on lap 1, creating a 40-second buffer between himself and the rest of the pack. Tony Fehlhaber kept within reach for the entire 200-kilometre distance, but no one could catch Dale Martin, who took class honours after 2 flawless laps. Rob Cowie made the biggest waves in the Pro Lights, coming from the rear of the pack to take second in class. In Performance 2-wheel drive, Jeff Loader proved to be too dominant over the 200-kilometre distance. Loader's rivals suffered a series of misfortunes throughout the race, with Darren Vanderwood having to be towed back on lap 2 and Stuart Chapman also pulling out on the same lap. In Production 4-wheel drive, the battle was between the Mitsubishi Pajero of Jeff Pickering and the Nissan Patrol of Amy Chapman. Pickering would hold a 2-minute lead over Chapman for most of the race, and despite being towed back, would claim the class honours at the end of the day. At the completion of Section 1, the overall leaderboard sees Glenn Owen and navigator Matt Ryan at the top, 52 seconds clear of Travis Robinson and Luke Ricciardo.
It's been a good first stage. We started out of position 4 today and we've come in first, so now it's good stuff for tomorrow. It is very dusty. It was pretty good for the first lap and a half, and sort of catch a few of the back markers, but up until then, yeah, it was a pretty good run, but it's going to be tough.
We ran a clean race. Just got stuffed up by the slower cars coming around lapping them. They wouldn't move out of the way and just lost at least 5 minutes on that last lap there because we were cooking pretty good. So in the position we sit now with Glenn and the way the event's structured, we just got to sort of really sit back, keep up close to him and wait for something to happen, because it's going to be very hard for us to make that 50 seconds up on him through actual racing. Do you know what I mean? So we're going to have to get close to him, but overtaking in these conditions is, a car like Glenn's is pretty impossible. So.
Well, that wraps up day 1 and the first 200 Ks of round 1 of the Australian Off-Road Championship. Coming up after the break, we head to day 2 and the epic 400K final of the BF Goodrich Tyres Sunraysia 600. After an eventful day 1 of competition, the stage had been set for day 2 of the BF Goodrich Tyres Sunraysia 600. The 200 kilometre long Section 1 was in the bag, and the teams returned early on day 2, ready to tackle the gruelling 4-lap, 400 kilometre Section 2 that awaited them. The finishing order from Section 1 would determine the starting order for Section 2, in what would be a staggered start every 30 seconds over the course of the next 30 minutes. With engine issues from Section 1, Glenn Towers didn't make the start line in the Pro class. Greg Hicks was also a no-show due to a DNF in Section 1, and Tanner James couldn't make the start after being under tow following the first encounter. In Extreme 2-wheel drive, Bo Robinson wouldn't be seen on the green, alongside Carl Habe and Ivan Robertson, all suffering major issues on day 1 and unfortunately would have to sit on the sidelines. Glenn Owen hit the dirt first and would have clean air ahead, given his number 1 finish in Section 1. After finishing a close second a day earlier, Travis Robinson would be next to start Section 2 and would have Owen in his crosshairs as the 400 kilometre journey began. Starting third was Mark Burrows, followed by Jack Rhodes and Matthew Kittle, all from our Pro class. Starting 6th was the first of the Extreme 2-wheel drive entries of Greg Gartner, followed by Pro class Rana Horan. Extreme 2-wheel drive's Brad Gallard was next, with Aaron Habe, the next Pro class driver in the hunt. On lap 1, Travis Robinson would continue his explosive form in the Pro class and go on to overtake Owen and lead the opening lap of Section 2. Just under a minute behind him, reigning champion Shannon Wrench was making up for lost time, powering through the field and setting his sights on a much-needed podium following his surprising DNF on day 1. After having to pit on day 1 of the event, Aaron Habe is putting his pedal to the metal, moving through the field at blistering pace. Habe was closing on race leader Travis Robinson, and by the end of lap 1, Robinson had dropped off the pace significantly, falling behind Habe, who laid down an impressive time. Coming up behind Robinson was Jack Rhodes in the Fuchs Lubricants Nissan, laying down his second best time of the event. Further back, Section 1 winner Glenn Owen had entered a world of hurt, encountering CV issues on lap 2 and sealing his fate for the event. Retiring soon after would ensure that Owen would not reap back-to-back victories. Determined to place better than the opening stanza, Matthew Kittle charged forward at the halfway point of the 400-kilometre-long Desert Enduro. The Toyota-powered V6 took it to Shannon Wrench and Travis Robinson up the front, laying down the quickest time of the race so far and firing a warning shot to all around. On lap 3, Shannon Wrench was also firing on all cylinders, fending off Kittle's slowly closing gap. Wrench recorded his best lap of the event so far and would desperately try to hang on for a podium finish following day 1's disaster. Aaron Habe was improving his lap times with each passing lap. His disappointing showing on day 1 meant Habe and his wife Liz would have to work double time, and they didn't disappoint, recording their PB of the event and closing in on Robinson, Wrench and Kittle up the pointy end of the field. Jack Rhodes wasn't so lucky, however. After putting in a strong second lap, he slipped well off the pace on lap 3 and would have to make up time on the final lap if he was going to have any chance of a podium. As the final lap commenced, it would be a rush to the checkered flag in the pro class. With only 1 lap and 100 kilometres to go, leader Travis Robinson would be dealt a cruel twist of fate, suffering a steering malfunction with a broken tie rod. Robinson's campaign came to a grinding halt, which allowed Matthew Kittle to snatch the lead as the race approached its finale. With the demise of the leader and early pace setter Travis Robinson, Aaron Habe slipped into second place behind Kittle and would push Kittle to the limit in his hunt for the newly crowned leaders. Shannon Wrench wouldn't go down without a fight despite slipping 3 minutes behind on lap 3. Jack Rhodes was also in the hunt, coming back with a vengeance on the final lap, bringing him inside the top 5. As the checkered flag approached, Habe would make a last-ditch attempt on Kittle's lead, cutting the gap by 1 minute. With the gap well and truly closed now, Kittle would just survive Habe's assault and would cross the finish line for his maiden win in the Australian Off-Road Championship with navigator Jordan Johansson. He charged from 10th on the grid into 5th position on day 1, then took the overall crown on day 2. With his last lap drive for victory, the husband and wife team of Aaron and Liz Habe took second in the pro class. Starting in third after the top 10 shootout, Habe slipped back to 9th due to a pit stop on day 1, which put him on the back foot coming into today. But after 600 kilometres and 6 gruelling hours of racing, they would finish only 1 minute and 7 seconds behind Kittel. In extreme two-wheel drive, Brad Gallard launched out of the gate on lap 1, overtaking all of the pro teams except the leader Travis Robinson. Further back in extreme two-wheel drive, day 1 winner Greg Gartner was experiencing issues with his Craig Carrison Race Engines Ford entry, lagging significantly behind after putting in very lean lap times a day earlier. Stephen Sanderson wasn't feeling the love either, with issues forcing the Jaws Racing Croyer back on lap 1. Like Gardner, Sanderson's lap times were also down from day 1, and he would have to make significant improvements to have any chance of a podium. On the second of 4 laps, things were getting worse for Greg Gartner. He put in his slowest time of the event so far, which was almost a full hour off his pace from day 1. Race leader Brad Gallard wasn't faring too much better, slowing significantly on lap 2. This allowed Stephen Sanderson to up the pace on the leader and close the gap to less than a minute. Section 1 victor Greg Gartner, however, wouldn't be going anywhere in a hurry. On lap 3, he would be forced out of the race altogether. Gartner's name tarnished with a DNF to wrap up his opening round campaign. The final lap would come down to Brad Gallard and Stephen Sanderson. Despite losing a significant chunk of time earlier in the race, Sanderson powered back into contention, overtaking Gallard on the final lap. Sanderson's return to form was the clincher for the Jaws Racing entry, bringing the team a much-needed class victory after a 4th place showing in Section 1. Brad Gallard would cross the finish line just under 2 minutes later, rounding out a very successful opening stanza for the Geyser Brothers Chevy-built Ford. The biggest story of the day, however, belonged to the Pro Light class. Dale Martin and navigator Adrian Rowe became the first Pro Light to make it onto the AORC podium since 2014, taking 3rd outright after a fierce battle with Andrew Moles and Tony Fellhaber, both drivers also making it to the top 10 overall. In Super 1650, the class honours would come down to a battle between Graham and Bodie Tickner, and former champs Werner and Sue Zeddy. But it was the Zeddy team that would take the overall victory by over 4 minutes. The Superlight class delivered a strong field of Polaris and Can-Am UTVs, and they didn't disappoint. In the turbo category, the Can-Ams dominated, taking all 3 spots on the podium, with Toby Watterley snatching the class win from Jeff McNiven on the final lap. In the naturally aspirated category, it was an all-Polaris affair. Brent Perrott took the win from Section 1 victor Tim Dewhurst, with early leader Cody Crocker's momentum stunted with a broken shock. 15-year-old debutant Stuart Chapman clinched the gold and his first win in the Australian Off-Road Championship, blitzing the field in the performance two-wheel drive category. Also from the Chapman Off-Road Racing stable, Paul Newman recovered from a DNF in Section 1 to finish second overall in the performance two-wheel drive class. In the production four-wheel drive category, Amy Chapman drove her Nissan Patrol to the class honours and capped off a successful weekend for the Chapman family. It was Amy's first national class win after finishing second in 2015. And in extreme four-wheel drive, Kingsley and Heath Whedon would battle to the top step of the podium ahead of Clayton Chapman and Adam Maguire in their Mitsubishi Triton.
Stay tight for our L4. R2, gate. Gate L5.
Overall, 26 competitors of the original 80 starters completed all 600k laps of the Kira station to wrap up a brutal and hard-fought opening round of the 2016 Australian Off-Road Championship.
A lot of cars dropped out, so it's bad luck to them, and wish them all the best moving forward. Hopefully we'll see them all at Fink, but yeah, happy to be standing on the top step. Look, we started off in a bit of dust, following Jack Rhodes, who we knew had a lot of pace, so if we stuck with him, we knew we'd be finishing off pretty well. Saw him drop out early, so I think he's back going again now, but carried through. And then that last section, we ended up losing fourth gear, so I had to push through, just using third and fifth, which was a bit of a struggle, but managed to hold Habe off and got up on the top step, so very happy.
That's an absolutely awesome effort from us and our team.
Yeah.
We just hung on and kept on pushing and pushing, and yeah, had a brilliant weekend. It's fantastic.
600 Ks is tough, but the Element cars do it awesome, yeah, so very excited. Just fought a bit of dust that last lap, but it was really good, yep.
The first lap was a killer, like there's no wind at all, just chasing those cars down the field. Just had to be patient and just kept pushing through, so unbelievable feeling, love it.
We started off with a good prologue, first in class for prologue, which put us up with the big boys in the fast cars, and then good lap opening yesterday, then got caught in the dust and dropped 4 minutes on our second lap yesterday, and then we just started this morning in 11th behind Shannon, and again lucky to start there, but right behind fast car, and you just get on the back and off we went, and yeah, we started to see him drop out, and you got to be there at the end, I guess.
Unfortunately, we had to fuel every lap, so we had to use the 15-minute fuel break, which then put us back in, back in the field and into probably more thicker dust on a little bit slower cars. But we ended up in the ninth after the top 10, so we were happy with that. It was really the first time out for this truck. So honestly, we've had a good run. Certainly the biggest thing over this weekend was just the dust factor, and the track got brutal, and you get pretty beaten up out there. Certainly feeling pretty weary right about now. We got a good result. We got first in class and 7th overall, even though we had some dramas and blowing a tyre, and then we had to had a bit of water pressure problems, so we had to come into the pits. But we just kept at it, kept slugging away, and through the dust, and kept it pretty clean.
So the Australian Off-Road Championship points looks like this, very tight indeed after the first of 3 rounds. Aaron Habe sits on top from Matthew Kittle and Jack Rhodes, but this is absolutely anyone's championship with 2 rounds to spare. Be sure to check out offroadracing.com.au for all the details.
There's more to come after the break as we wind back to the final round of the 2012 Australian Super Truck Sprint Series from Winton Motor Raceway.